Hey everyone, it's Tobes, and welcome to your second monitor. Today is the next video in my series of Secrets of Strixhaven Commander deck techs. I'm releasing a new Strixhaven Commander deck every Thursday through the end of June when Marvel Superheroes drops, in addition to my usual Monday Commander deck tech videos. So if you have a request for a specific Strixhaven Commander you'd like to see me build, let me know in the comments below. As you see, today our commander is Nita, Forum Conciliator, a retired Silver Quill professor who now works at the Forum of Amity. The Forum is a complex of buildings, complete with amphitheater, founded by Shadrick Silverquill in the wake of the Blood Age. Its purpose is to strengthen the peace between the nations and peoples of Arcavios, giving them a designated place for their emissaries and diplomats to convene, confer, and negotiate. Conciliators are the ambassadors, advocates, appointees, and advisors who keep the whole place running. Even in her retirement, Nita leads the occasional guest lecture or class on diplomacy and debate, and she's widely regarded as being able to turn antipathy to affinity and enmity to amity. Hey, that's the name of the forum. Huh. I'm excited to show you what I put together for Nita, but before we get started, let's go over my deck building template. I like to build my decks around my commander. I want to show off why it's such a cool card and why I thought it deserved a whole deck. So I take about 30 cards and put them toward doing whatever my commander asks of me. This is our game plan. It's what we do at the table and how we try to win. 30 more cards go towards supporting that game plan in the form of card advantage, acceleration, and interaction pieces. I usually run 1 or 2 sweepers, sometimes more if it would play into the game plan, sometimes none at all, and I almost always keep to a floor of 38 lands. That way I can always hit my land drops and cast my spells and, play commander. So let's talk about our commander. Nita Forum Conciliator is a 2/3 legendary human advisor for 1, a white, and a black. She says, whenever we cast a spell we don't own, we put a 1/1 counter on each creature we control. That's pretty nice. And if we pay 2 generic mana and sacrifice another creature, we can exile target instant or sorcery card from an opponent's graveyard. We can cast that spell this turn, and mana of any type can be spent to cast that spell, and if that spell would be put into a graveyard, we exile it instead, but all of that only as a sorcery. This second ability is challenging to build around, as it requires our opponents to have instants and sorceries in their graveyards, and there are really only 4 ways that happens. The first involves them casting those spells, probably targeting us or our stuff, which makes turning them against their owners an uphill battle. The second is to prevent those spells from having any appreciable effect in the first place, either by assembling a suite of counterspells, not easy in these colors, or using protective spells to keep our permanents alive and in play. The third is to attack our opponent's hands and force them to discard those spells, a tactic that's inefficient in multiplayer Magic and sure to paint a target on our face. And the last is to mill our opponents, which has some of the same problem of earning our opponent's ire as hand attack does. None of these are bad ideas, mind you, but none of them are ideal either. For one thing, whether we're letting our opponents cast their spells or not, all of these methods rely on our opponents having instants and sorceries for us to cast, not to mention spells that we would want to cast. It doesn't really matter if we were able to put a counter on all of our creatures by casting an opponent's spell, if that spell is a board wipe, and we lose all our creatures. More importantly, all these methods feel like they run counter to the flavor of a commander whose whole deal is, being so good at making deals that everyone leaves the bargaining table feeling good about the result. And so I took this deck in a different direction. Theft. For whatever reason, the feel-bads that come from getting milled or getting hand attacked or having your spells countered just aren't there in the same way when someone else is playing your spells for you. I mean, sure, it doesn't feel great to lose access to those spells yourself, but at least you're getting to see your deck do its thing, albeit under the control of another player. Maybe this doesn't actually feel better than those other methods. Which is why it's our job to change that. My approach in playing this deck is to be so excited to see what my opponents have brought to the table. This isn't a Send Triplets or a Laughing Jasper Flint deck, unapologetically taking our opponent's stuff and using it to give them a taste of their own medicine. No, our commander is a veteran at handling disputants, at giving them what they want. And what does every commander player want? For their pod to be impressed by the deck they built. So that's what we do. We praise the cool cards they've sleeved up. We ooh and ah at the sweet interactions they've included. And we overall show their decks the love that they deserve. In the process, we get to use those cool cards, admire those interactions, even if they can't happen since we took half the pieces of them, and show our love to their list by putting it to work for us. I'm not suggesting being disingenuous. I truly believe that commander decks which weren't crafted by someone who loved their work at least a little are incredibly rare, and discovering what makes an opponent's deck awesome or hilarious or powerful or flavorful is a terrific way to help everyone have more fun playing Magic. Nita gives us an excuse to celebrate our friends' creations, so that's what we do. But it would be entirely too underhanded to rely on only our own thievery to carry us to victory. We also have a host of creatures and token-generating effects to do double duty for us. They first act as sacrifice fodder for Nita's second ability, letting us steal whatever cool instants and sorceries our opponents do end up casting, and it's super fun to get to cast something like Cultivate or Stock Up or Seething Song in an Orzhov deck. Then, second, the creatures which remain act as bodies for us to shower with counters whenever we cast our opponent's spells, strengthening our Silver Quill forces until they're ready to graduate from words to deeds. The fun doesn't end there. We know we'll be sacrificing our creatures, so we have ways of being rewarded for creatures dying, as well as ways to bring them back again. We know we'll be littering our legions with counters, so we have cards that care about those counters and give us ways to use them. We even have a few cards that keep us safe, not by stopping our opponents from acting against us, but simply by dissuading them and disincentivizing them from doing so. After all, just look at Nita. She's the face of equanimity. We aren't here to disrupt things, but to bury hatchets and mend fences and build something trustworthy and lasting together. Everyone who came to this table wants the same thing, so surely we can reach an agreement about it. We make our negotiations in good faith, and we offer our opponents a claim by way of appropriating their accoutrement. Our positive attitude is absolutely unassailable, unlike our opponent's defenses, and our positions are as agreeable as we are. By the time the game is over, everyone's left feeling appreciated, even if they didn't win against us. Again, a little fair-minded recognition is all it takes to keep their attention occupied while we raid the diplomatic pouch. You'll enjoy this deck if you like the mechanical interplay between creatures and counters and spells and subterfuge, or if you like the idea of being cheerful and starry-eyed over your opponent's decks, because it makes you feel just as good as knowing that's exactly how you'll beat them. So, as usual, we're going to go over this Moxfield list that's linked in the video's description. At the bottom of it, you will see a considering section full of cards, especially overfull today, of cards that I wanted to include in this deck, but ultimately, which didn't make the cut for me. However, if you have a bigger budget or a smaller one, if you like what I've done with this thievery theme and you want to go harder into it, or if you're interested by this deck and you want to take it in a different direction, like maybe a heavier tokens theme, that considering section is a great place to begin when you build your own Nita Forum Conciliator deck. So let's begin with the biggest and most relevant part of our game plan, which is our theft section. These are cards that are intended to trigger Nita's first ability, the ability that triggers when we cast a spell we don't own. Most of these cards will do that. Some of them don't, at least one of them doesn't, but those cards are still on theme as sort of thievery style cards, and they help us in other ways. And we'll talk about those when we get to them. So we're going to begin with Dead Man's Chest. This is 1 and a black for an aura that enchants a creature an opponent controls. It says when that creature dies, we exile cards equal to its power from the top of its owner's library, and we may cast spells from among those cards for as long as they remain exiled, and mana of any type can be spent to cast them. So this kind of effect, we're going to see this wording and similar variations on it a bunch of times in this section. I'm going to go over the little picky parts of it right now, and I'll cover the differences as we see them. First, it's notable that it says we can cast these spells for as long as they remain exiled. What that means is this effect has specified a time period in which we have to cast those spells, which means for as long as they remain exiled, essentially that's the rest of the game, we're going to be, unless there's something that of course pulls them out of exile, it kind of makes them into a second hand that uses this effect. If it didn't give us this specified amount of time, like you can cast those spells from as long as they remain exiled or until the end of your next turn. If it didn't specify an amount of time, instead of letting us cast them at their normal timing, which is what this does, it lets us cast them as part of the resolution, which is right then. And if we don't do it right then, well, too bad, we don't get to do it. But most of them work like this, just as long as they remain exiled, which gives us, like I mentioned, a sort of pseudo additional hand. It also says you may cast spells from among those cards that we exiled. The alternative here is you may play cards, or you may play lands and cast spells. If they specify that we can do anything other than cast spells, that's great because it's going to specify that we can play cards or play lands, which gives us the ability to play those lands as our land drops. Dead Man's Chest doesn't, which means if we exile cards that are lands, those are just going to stay in exile, we can't do anything with them, but at least we can cast the spells that we find. Finally, it says mana of any type can be spent to cast those spells. Sometimes it says mana of any color can be spent to cast those spells, or you can cast the spells as and spend mana as though it were any color. What's the difference between type and color? Well, with one exception, there is no difference. They work the same way. That exception is specifically spells that have colorless mana in their casting cost, like an Eldrazi might. It makes sense to say it, but sometimes it has to be said. Colorless spells, colorless mana, doesn't have a color. So if this had said mana of any color can be spent to cast those spells, then it basically turns every pip in the casting cost of a spell that isn't a colorless pip specifically into like a generic mana casting cost. But if it does have colorless pips, we have to still spend colorless mana on those pips in order to cast them using Dead Man's Chest, or using something that would say color rather than type. However, Dead Man's Chest says type, so it fixes perfectly every spell, including the ones with colorless mana in their cost. I know this is a lot to absorb with just this one card. I'm going to go over this again with each of the cards that we're going to see. But yeah, I wanted to give you a little primer right now. First of all, though, this is a cool card. We put this on a creature with a big power because we want to exile a bunch of cards, and then we find a way to kill it or hope that it dies in a different way, and then we get a bunch of cards, we get to use them. If that creature doesn't die, then that's too bad. Dead Man's Chest will fall off if that creature gets bounced or if it goes to exile or whatever. That's a shame, but them's the breaks, and that's all right. It is worth noting, though, if we put this on someone's commander and that commander is destroyed or dies in combat or something, and its controller chooses to put it into the command zone, Dead Man's Chest is still going to trigger because that creature did die. It was put into the command zone from the graveyard as a state-based action once it died. So it still gets that dies trigger. We do have one card, at least one card, that will be a little bit of a non-bow with Dead Man's Chest, and I'll talk about that when we get to it, but for the most part, pretty cool card. Next up, we have Dream Thief's Bandana. This is 2 generic mana for an equipment that equips for 1, so it's the casting cost and equip cost of Swiftfoot Boots. We already know how good those are. Are they in this deck? We'll see. It says whenever an equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, we look at the top card of their library, then exile it face down. And we get another one of these. For as long as it remains exiled, you may play it, and mana of any type can be spent to cast that spell. So it says play, which means we can play lands from it. We would just be doing it as our land drop. It says for as long as it remains exiled, so we've got a span in which to cast those cards and cast or play those cards. We just have to do so with the normal timing restrictions, like we can't play a land drop, except when we normally would be able to. We can't cast a creature except when we normally would be able to, and so forth. And just like Dead Man's Chest, it's mana of any type, so it's a good fix for us. Nice. Outrageous Robbery is next. This is for Murders at Karlov Manor. This is X and double black for an instant that says target opponent exiles the top X cards of their library face down, which means they don't get to look at them. Only we do, because we can look at and play those cards for as long as they remain exiled. That's pretty sweet. Normally, when it says to exile something, unless it specifies face up or face down, it's always face up. So since Outrageous Robbery does it face down, we get a little bit of thievery that even the controller doesn't know what we have stolen. That seems cool. It also says if we cast a spell this way, we can spend mana as though it were mana of any type to cast it. So, look at and play those cards means we can play lands, we can cast spells, and if we cast those spells, mana of any type. Pretty good. And that's as long as they remain exiled, so it's that same span as before. What's especially nice about Outrageous Robbery is it lets us muck up our opponent's stacking the top of their library. If they have like a scry effect or a surveil effect and they scry or surveil to the top, if they cast Brainstorm and they put some cards on top of their library, if they have some other way of tucking their card back into the top, 1 or 2 or 3 cards on top of their library, Outrageous Robbery can mess them up because it works at instant speed. We just see, they've taken, maybe someone casts Commit to Memory and puts another opponent's commander, on top of their library, second from the top. And that player says, that's fine, I'll just keep it there and I'll draw it. Well, we can cast Outrageous Robbery and steal it. Now, it's going to go to exile, so they have the option to put it in the command zone, but yeah, if someone were to tuck something else in their library, we might be able to steal that from them, or just otherwise mess them up. Outrageous Robbery is a lot of fun as a way to, play in those kind of sneakier ways. And if not, it's just a nice X spell that gets us access to a bunch of good stuff. Next, we have Predator's Hour. This is 1 and a black for a sorcery that says until end of turn, creatures you control gain menace. That's already pretty sweet. And whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, exile the top card of that player's library face down. You can look at it, play it for as long as it remains exiled, and spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast that spell. Now, we did say color here, so rather than type, it's not quite the same. However, and this is also face down, is how they're getting exiled, but otherwise, this whole effect kind of reads like all of our creatures got a Dream Thief's bandana. I guess Dream Thief's bandana is also face down. So yeah, it's almost the same as this, except Dream Thief's bandana says type, and Predator's Hour says mana of any color. So only difference there. Plus it gives menace, so it's pretty likely that our creatures are going to deal combat damage to a player. Neat. Next we have, Chaos Wand, such a cool card. 3 generic mana for an artifact that if we pay 4, which is a lot, and tap it, then target opponent exiles cards from the top of their library until they exile an instant or sorcery. We can cast that card without paying its mana cost, and we put all the other exiled cards that weren't cast this way on the bottom in a random order. Cool, because this is guaranteed to hit an instant or sorcery if there is one left in our opponent's library. It is possible we're going to hit one that we don't want to cast, like maybe we hit a counter spell that doesn't really help us that much. Although it is possible we can activate Chaos Wand at instant speed. Something to think about. But if we don't hit something that we don't want to cast, if we hit something we want to cast, rather, we can cast an instant or sorcery. We can do it right away. It's probably going to be either a big, cool sorcery effect or something interactive, or we might hit, like, an explosive vegetation, which we can definitely use. Or someone might find we might find someone's lightning bolt. That seems good too. And then whenever we've cast it, it's now in that opponent's graveyard, which means we can use Nita's second ability to sacrifice one of our creatures and flash that card back, because since Nita lets us cast an instant or sorcery from an opponent's graveyard and then it goes to exile once it resolves, that's basically flashback. So Chaos Wand finds us something, Nita lets us cast it again. Pretty great. I like that Chaos Wand doesn't just find us something that we can use for sure and lets us cast it for free, even though free is after this 4 mana. It also empowers our commander. Seems great. Next up is Cunning Rhetoric. Originally, I believe, from the Commander 21 product. Yeah, this was the original Silver Quill deck from original Strixhaven block, or set, I should say. For 2 and a black, we get an enchantment that says whenever an opponent attacks you and or one or more planeswalkers you control, exile the top card of that player's library. You may play it as long as it remains exiled, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast it. So, as long as it remains exiled, we get our span again. We can play it, so they are lands. That's fine. We can play those lands or cast spells, and it is color rather than type, so something to watch for. However, this is one of those cards I mentioned in the heart of the deck that is kind of protective of us. It doesn't stop our opponents from attacking us, but it does incentivize them to attack someone else, or disincentivize them from attacking us. Because if they say, I'm going to attack you, we can say, well, hang on. If you do, we get to exile the top card of your library, which maybe you don't want, maybe you don't care about it, but it does mean it's something that I can use, that you're going to be denied, but only if you attack us, you can go after someone else. And that might be enough to persuade someone to go after someone else, rather than lose a card that maybe they want, or maybe they just don't like the fact that we're taking their card away, Yeah, or they don't want to empower us. Cunning Rhetoric can do a lot more work than it seems as just we have to wait for someone to attack us in order to get value out of it, which means that sometimes we're either getting value out of it as like hard value in the form of exiling the top card of their library, or soft value in the form of convincing them not to attack us. Both are good. Next we have Gix, Yawgmoth Praetor. This is from the Brothers War originally. This is 1 and double black for a 3/3 legendary Phyrexian Praetor that says, whenever a creature deals combat damage to one of your opponents, its controller may pay 1 life, and if they do, they draw a card. So that is anyone's creatures. As long as they're doing damage to one of our opponents, it doesn't matter who controls the creature. They get this trigger. Gix gives it to them. Which means opponent A can attack us, but if they attack opponent B, they have the option of drawing cards just for 1 life per card, and that's a great rate. So it's another one of these soft effects. Like, look, you can attack me, but if you attack someone else and do the damage, you can probably draw cards off of it. Most players are going to want to do that, as long as it's someone that's one of our opponents, which just means anyone but us. Sweet. And it also works on us. If we want to play some life, we can draw some cards. That seems great. Gix also lets us pay 4 and triple black, so a big effect, and requires us to discard as many cards as we want, and we get to exile that many cards off the top of an opponent's library. And then we get to play lands and cast spells from among cards exiled this way without paying their mana costs. Notice it does not say for as long as they remain exiled, which means we have to do this right now. So we can play lands, which means we get to make a land drop at kind of instant speed. It's kind of weird if we haven't made our land drop. But it also lets us cast whatever spells we found for free, all of which are going to trigger Nita's first ability. Seems great. Plus, I guess, in case it's not obvious, by activating this post-combat after we've done a bunch of damage, paid a bunch of life, and drawn a bunch of cards, that means we have the ability to discard more cards, and thereby exile more cards from the top of our opponent's library, which doesn't have to be the same opponent that we attacked. Just saying. Next we have Realmbreaker, the Evasion Tree. This is a card that steals from our opponent without giving us a trigger for Nita on her first ability. However, it does empower her second ability. Let's take a look. Realmbreaker, the Evasion Tree is 3 generic mana for a legendary artifact, a really cool one from the most recent Phyrexian invasion at time of recording, I guess I should say. For 2 and a tap, we have a target opponent mill 3 cards, which milling is not something we're doing a lot of, but we are doing it right here. It puts cards on our opponent's graveyard, which means that is, if we have milled any instant or sorceries, that gives us access to those cards using Nita's second ability, the activated ability where we flash back one of their instants or sorceries. That's okay. Even if not, though, once we mill those cards, we can put a land from their graveyard onto the battlefield tapped under our control, and it gains, if it would leave the battlefield, exile it instead of putting it anywhere else. So it doesn't even say put a land from among the cards milled. It's just from anywhere in their graveyard. If they've had like an Evolving Wilds go to the graveyard or some other fetch, if they're playing some kind of, Titania deck or Gitrog monster deck and lands are going to their graveyard, we can steal those lands. Or if it's just in those 3 cards that we milled, we can steal one of those. It does come into play tapped for us, but it's sort of like saying if we know they've got a land in their library, or if we're willing to make the gamble, we get to, every turn, pay 2 mana and get a land into play tapped, which is basically a free, repeatable Rampant Growth. That's terrific. And it might even be better than a Rampant Growth because we might get like a fetch or a shock land, or who knows what we're going to get. So yeah, even if the land we find is not one that produces white or black, well, we've got plenty of generic mana costs we can use that mana for, including activating Realmbreaker. And who knows? Maybe there's going to be a situation where we want that other color of mana. We're stealing a lot of things. Spoilers, that's not really a thing that this deck needs, but it's nice to be able to have the option. And that's basically why Realmbreaker is in this deck. We do have this other ability, though, which is pay 10, tap, and sacrifice Realmbreaker to search our library for any number of Praetor cards, then put them on the battlefield and shuffle. So how many Praetors are we running in this deck? Oh, just Gix, got it. Yeah, so Realmbreaker, its second ability is really meant to summon up the new Phyrexian buddies, like Elish Norn or Sheoldred, but we don't have any of those in this deck, so yeah, we're not really looking for that. We just want to fill our opponent's graveyards and steal their lands. That's fine. Next up is Abstruse Appropriation. This is from Modern Horizons 3. It's 2, a white, and a black for an instant with Devoid, meaning this card has no color. And I know you're thinking, but it's white and black. But no, it's Devoid. Is that relevant? Not usually. I mean, sometimes someone has a card that says, I don't know, protection from black, and we can still target that card with Abstruse Appropriation because even though it requires black to cast, it does not have a color. Yeah, Devoid doesn't come up that often, but it's something that could be usable. Anyway, it lets us exile target non-land permanent, and it says you may cast that card for as long as it remains exiled, and you may spend colorless mana as though it were mana of any color to cast that spell. So, it fixes our colorless mana, which is a little weird, but we do have sources of colorless mana in this deck, not a big deal. And even if not, we're spending 4 mana to exile a non-land permanent, which is a solid rate for removal, and we just keep this card in exile until we have the mana we can cast it, or until we have enough colorless mana to make it work. But it does say, you know, we still can just use our white and black mana, or any color of mana we may have stolen with Realmbreaker to cast that card. So yeah, Abstruse Appropriation is really mostly a removal spell, but being able to also cast that spell, pretty cool. Next is Bismuth Mindrender. 3 and a black for a 4/3 Eldrazi, again with Devoid, probably not relevant, but you never know. And it has Menace. 4/3 Menace for 4, that's okay. And it says whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, that player exiles cards from the top of their library until they exile a non-land card. So we just get to have a hit for definite. And we can cast that card by paying life equal to the spell's mana value rather than paying the mana cost. Which is to say, it's costing us life, and we just don't mind. It's basically free. Spending life in Commander, we don't do a lot of it, but we do some of it in this deck. You know, Gix requires us to spend life. This thing requires us to spend life. Not many other things do. Totally great. Just, we're not having to spend our mana on it, so as long as we can get in and hit, which we likely will, we can have them cascade essentially into a non-land, and we get to cast it for just the cost of life. That sounds great. Court of Locthwain is next. Love this card. I love all the Eldraine stuff. It's my favorite plane. This is 2 and double black for an enchantment that says when it enters, you become the Monarch. Now, what is the Monarch? Monarch is basically just 2 rules stapled together. The first is, if you have the player designation, the Monarch, which you will when you play this, because that's what happens when it enters, then at the start of your end step, you draw a card. The Monarch always draws a card at the start of their end step. That's one of the 2 rules. The other rule is, when you attack, if your creatures do combat damage to a player who is the Monarch, you become the Monarch. That's how the monarchy moves, basically. Unless you have a card that says you become the Monarch, the only way to become the Monarch is to do combat damage to the person who already is the Monarch. So it encourages players to attack each other and to move the monarchy around because you want to get that extra card at your end step. Pretty cool mechanic. It also says, at the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top card of target opponent's library. That's just going to happen no matter what at the start of your upkeep. And it says you may play that card for as long as it remains exiled, so we can just get to just accumulate cards under Court of Locthwain, and mana of any type can be spent to cast it. So this is the best version of this effect. Seems good, because you can play it as long as it remains exiled, any type. Seems good. In addition, if you're the Monarch, until end of turn, you may cast a spell from among cards exiled with this enchantment without paying its mana cost. So, notably, this is all one ability. So it's not like you exile a card and maybe you have a couple of cards exiled under this, and then you go to combat, you take the monarchy from someone, and now you can cast something for without paying its mana cost. What this actually means is, at the start of your upkeep, you exile a card, and if you are the Monarch, one of the cards that are exiled with Court of Locthwain, you can cast it at an appropriate time. Regular timing rules apply. Sometime this turn without paying its mana cost. But that's only if you're the Monarch when this upkeep trigger resolves. So yeah, otherwise though, it's just accumulating cards every turn. That seems pretty good. Next we have Gonti, Lord of Luxury, a classic for any theft deck. 2 and double black for a 2/3 legendary Aetherborn Rogue with Death Touch. 2/3 Death Touch, love it. And look how stylish. I love Gonti. Anyway, whenever Gonti enters, we look at the top 4 cards of target opponent's library, exile one of them face down, and put the rest on the bottom in a random order. We can cast that card for as long as it remains exiled, and mana of any type can be spent to cast it. So, it's cast, so if we hit 4 lands, that's a shame. We can still get to exile one of them, and it's face down, so they'll never know that we don't have one of their spells. But yeah, if we do hit a land, we can't play it. However, we're digging 4 cards deep, so it's pretty likely we're going to hit at least one spell of some kind, and its mana is perfectly fixed, so that seems good. Yeah, thank goodness for Gonti. Speaking of Gonti, we've got a little more Gonti to enjoy. From Aetherdrift, this is Gonti Night Minister. 2 and double black for a 3/4 legendary Aetherborn Rogue that says whenever a player casts a spell they don't own, that player creates a treasure token. So this works for everyone. And everyone's making treasures. So it encourages people, again, to cast spells that they don't own, so they can get treasures. But how do they do that? Well, whenever a creature deals combat damage to one of our opponents, again, not us, but someone else, its controller looks at the top card of that opponent's library and exiles it face down. They may play that card as long as it remains exiled, and mana of any type can be spent to cast a spell this way. So, perfect fixing, perfect, it's play, so it's not just cast. We can do lands with it, and it's only the top card rather than the top 4 like original Gonti, but it works for anyone who gets hit except us. So it's as long as it's just one of our opponents. So it encourages our opponents to attack each other, because not only do they essentially get to draw a card from the defending player's library, but when they cast it, if it's a spell, they get a treasure for it. Gonti is here to help everyone. Love this guy. Next we have Intellect Devourer from Baldur's Gate. This is 3 and a black for a 2/4 horror with 2 abilities. Devour Intellect, which is when this creature enters, each opponent exiles a card from their hand until this creature leaves the battlefield. Don't really love hand attack, but it's just sort of Oblivion ringed, They could kill the Intellect Devourer before that card, is used somehow, and they'll get their card back. That's fine. But it also has Body Thief. We can play lands and cast spells from among cards exiled with this creature, and if we cast a spell this way, we can spend mana as though we're mana of any color, not type, to cast it. So not perfect fixing, but pretty close. And we can play lands, that's pretty good. But we get to just steal some stuff out of people's hands. That's not something we want to do a lot of, but we've got it once, and that's okay. Yeah. Next we have Petty Larceny from the Assassin's Creed set. This is 3 and a black for a sorcery, ignore this for now, that says look at the top 2 cards of target opponent's library and exile those cards face down. We can play them as long as they remain exiled, and mana of any type can be spent to cast them. Great. Play, type, as long as they remain exiled, this is the best version of this effect. It also makes us a treasure token. So for 4 mana, we're getting a mana back essentially. We get a little bit of a rebate. It's pretty good for 2 cards. However, it also has free running for 1 and a black, meaning we can cast it for its free running cost if we dealt damage to a player this turn with an assassin or a commander. Now, it looks like we're running 0 assassins, which means as long as Nita does combat damage, we can cast Petty Larceny post-combat for just 2 mana, and that's pretty good, especially since it makes that treasure, so it is an aggregate 1 mana. But casting this for 4 is also totally fine to get 2 cards, so yeah, pretty good. Next we have Black Cat Cunning Thief from the Spider-Man set. 3 and double black for a 2/3 legendary human rogue villain that says when she enters, look at the top 9 cards of target opponent's library and exile 2 of them face down and put the rest on the bottom in a random order. We can play the exiled cards for as long as they remained exiled, and mana of any type can be spent to cast those spells this way. Type, play, as long as they remain exiled, this is the best version of this effect, and we get 2 cards. We get to dig 9 deep, find the best 2. It is a 5 mana 2/3, but it's a big effect stapled to this 2/3, and that's not bad. Next up is Puppeteer Click. This is a sweet one. 3 and double black for a 3/2 fairy wizard. Notice it's not this scarecrow looking thing. It's the fairies holding up the scarecrow. It's got flying, and it says when it enters, we put target creature card from an opponent's graveyard onto the battlefield under our control. It gains haste, and at the beginning of our next end step, we exile it. So it's not going to trigger Nita because we're not casting it. We are just reanimating a creature from an opponent's graveyard. And we don't get to do anything with it unless we do it this turn. It does gain haste, but we exile it at the end step. Which means if it dies before the end step, it won't be exiled, it'll just go to that opponent's graveyard again. That's fine. So this gives us a way to, for 5 mana, we get a 3/2 flyer that reanimates a creature from an opponent's graveyard and gives it haste, which lets us do whatever we want with it. And hopefully what we want to do with it is sacrifice it to Nita in order to activate her second ability and exile, flash back a instant or sorcery from an opponent's graveyard. So we have that creature as fodder for us that's come back after it's done whatever work it needs to do in combat or with its abilities or whatever. That keeps us from having to exile it, and if we want it exiled, then we don't have to sacrifice it, we just let it go to exile. That's pretty great. Puppeteer Click also has Persist, which means when it dies, if it didn't have any -1/-1 counters on it, it comes back with a -1/-1 counter on it. And when it comes back, it re-enters the battlefield and does this all over again. That's pretty cool. It comes back as a 2/1 flyer, and if it dies again, it just goes away. Except for the fact that Nita, if we cast a spell that we don't own, puts a +1/+1 counter on each of our creatures. So if the Puppeteer click has a -1/-1 counter on it because it persisted, and we put a +1/+1 counter on it, those counters annihilate each other, and it's just back to being a 3/2. Meaning if it dies again, it will have died without any -1/-1 counters on it. So it will persist a second time. That's the loop with this. This is us stealing things in a way that doesn't trigger Nita's first ability, but does give us a lot of value and a piece of fodder we can use for Nita's second ability to cast spells from opponents' graveyards. In addition, once this dies, we can just bring it back. Now, how is it going to die? It's a flyer. Well, maybe someone removes it, maybe someone blocks it, or maybe we sacrifice the click itself with Nita. That's totally fine for us to do, especially since it will persist when we do that. So it gives us the ability to use not just the creature that we reanimate as fodder for sacrifice, but also the click itself if we want to. Now, we can't do that at instant speed, which would be pretty nice, but that's okay. It's still pretty powerful. Yeah, I like it. All right, next up is Crabomination. I'm going to try that again. Crabomination. There we go. Got there. This is from Modern Horizons 3. It's 4 and double black for a 5/5 Crab Demon with Emerge from Artifact for 5 and double black, meaning we can cast it by sacrificing an artifact and paying the emerge cost reduced by the mana value of that artifact. So if we had like an expensive artifact that we don't need to keep, we can reduce this to maybe just double black to get our 5/5 Crabomination in play. Even if not, though, 6 mana for a 5/5 that has a cool effect is fine. It says, when this creature enters, target opponent exiles the top card of their library, a card at random from their graveyard, and a card at random from their hand. So they don't get to choose the card in their graveyard or their hand. And then we can cast a spell from among cards exiled this way without paying its mana cost. So if it turns out that with all that randomness, we get 3 lands, we don't get to cast anything. However, if we get any spell, and it's something we're able to cast, like it's not a counterspell or something, we cast it immediately because it doesn't say, until end of turn or as long as it remains exiled. It's part of the resolution of this effect. We will cast it for free, however, and assuming it is not, assuming it's a spell we can cast at all, when we cast it for free, it will trigger our commander's first ability and put a counter on all of our creatures, including the Crabomination, making it into a 6/6 for 6. And it doesn't have trample, but those are the stats of Colossal Dreadmaw, and that seems pretty good. Alright, next up is Staff of Eden Vault's Key. This is a card we could emerge from Artifact with a Crabomination if we wanted to. It's another card that, again, does not trigger our commander's first ability, but will help us in other ways that are similar and works with our commander's first ability. This is 6 generic mana for a legendary artifact that says when it enters, we put target legendary permanent that is not named Staff of Eden from a graveyard onto the battlefield under our control, which means this can reanimate something of ours if we want, but it doesn't have to. If an opponent has any legendary permanent in their graveyard, if they have the Immortal Sun in their graveyard, we can get that. If they've got any legendary creature, if they've chosen to put their commander in the graveyard, we don't want to do that because it will change zones and they could choose to put it in the command zone, but in any case, we can reanimate a legendary permanent. And that's not unlikely these days when so many creatures are legendary. Pretty sweet. And it lets us reanimate something of our own if we want to, if it's legendary. It also says we can tap it to draw a card for each permanent we control but don't own. Every one of the spells that we're casting with and getting triggers from Nita might be a non-permanent spell, an instant or a sorcery. But if it's a permanent spell from all of these theft effects that we've got, those are just going to sit on our playmat being permanents that we control but don't own. Staff of Eden, once it's in play, is going to let us draw probably several cards every turn, and it's just very powerful that way. This is a card in the deck that, for its mana cost, it's pretty swingy. It's either going to be very good for you in some games, or it's not going to do much of anything. But yeah, when it does something, it's exciting, and that seems fun. Next we have Xander's Pact. This is 4 and double black for a sorcery with Casualty 2, meaning as we cast it, if we sacrifice a creature power 2 or greater, we get to copy it, so we get to do it twice. So this is a nice sacrifice outlet for our many tokens in this deck. It says each opponent exiles the top card of their library. We may cast spells from among those cards this turn. Only this turn. But if we cast a spell this way, we pay life equal to that spell's mana value rather than pay its mana cost. So if we've got 3 opponents, we get to see 3 cards. Maybe they're not spells, maybe they're all lands. That's unfortunate. But if they are spells, we can cast them without paying any mana, and that's pretty good. We just have to do so this turn. And if we casualtied Xander's Pact, it's going to happen twice. So we're going to get to see 2 cards from the top of each library. Next up, we have Arvinox the Mind Flail. This is the Demogorgon from Stranger Things, but a Universes Within printing. It's a 9/9 legendary enchantment creature horror for 4 and triple black that says it isn't a creature unless we control 3 or more permanents we don't own. So that's more synergy with the cards we don't own, the same as we have with Staff of Eden. What that means is, whenever we don't have 3 creatures, or 3 or more permanents we don't own, rather, Arvinox isn't a creature. So therefore it isn't a horror. It's just a legendary enchantment. It means it can't attack or block until we get to this condition. But it's easy to get to, because at the beginning of our end step, we exile the bottom card of each opponent's library face down. For as long as those cards remain exiled, we can look at them, we can cast permanent spells from among them, and we can spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast those spells. So not perfect fixing, and only permanent spells, but we are getting a card from each opponent's library, and it's the bottom, so it probably feels even less bad for them, I guess, than the top one. I don't know why it would feel different, but, there it is. So we're accumulating things that we can eventually cast, especially if they are permanent spells, and eventually have Arvinox become, a real boy. Neat. Next up, we have the Elder Brain. This is 5 and double black for a 6/6 horror with menace. It says whenever this creature attacks a player, exile all cards from that player's hand, then they draw that many cards. You may play lands and cast spells from among the exiled cards for as long as they remain exiled, and if you cast a spell this way, you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast it. So not perfect mana fixing, but close. And we'd get to cast those spells and play those lands from exile as long as they're exiled, so that's pretty great. It is a hand attack, which is not my favorite thing, but at least that player sort of gets to wheel. Like, if they had 4 cards in hand, they're going to lose all of them, but they will get 4 new ones. So that's okay. And then it's a draw effect, so maybe they care about drawing. I don't know. It seems like a pretty good card for us, and not a terrible one for our opponent. But if they hate it, that's okay, because that makes it removal bait, or a removal magnet. That means they're going to use what limited interaction they may have available to them to kill the Elder Brain, so they don't have to keep, possibly repeatedly, losing their hand. So they're using that interaction on the Elder Brain rather than something we care about more, like Nita. Next we have, Thieving Amalgam. I'm always excited when I can put this thing in the deck. It's 5 and double black for a 6/7 Ape Snake. You heard me. That says at the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, you manifest the top card of that player's library. To manifest something is to say we take that card from the top of their library, don't show them what it is, put it on the battlefield face down under our control as a 2/2 creature. It doesn't matter what the card is on its front face, it is a 2/2 creature that we get to look at, and if it is a creature card, we can flip it over at faster than instant speed. Unmorphing is just a special action, doesn't use the stack, by paying its mana cost. Now that does not fix our mana. We still have to pay, if it's like 2 red and a green, we've still got to pay those pips somehow. Or we just leave it face down as a 2/2 creature. Obviously, this is not casting a spell, so it doesn't trigger Nita, but it is us stealing something, and it helps Nita in other ways, because this is happening at the beginning of each opponent's upkeep. So everyone's turn, other than ours, we get a 2/2 from their deck that maybe we can flip over, but even if we can't, it's now a 2/2 creature we can put counters on with Nita, we can sacrifice to Nita, we can attack with it, we can just block with it. Whatever we need. Whatever we need to do. All right, never mind. In any case, being able to use these creatures and steal them is pretty great for us, but we also have, whenever a creature we control but don't own dies, its owner loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. So this is one more card, like Arvinox and like our Staff of Eden, that cares about our stuff that we control but don't own. So a little bit of drain, pretty nice. Last is Heartless Conscription. This is a wrath that steals things. That's why it's 8 mana. It's 6 and double black for a sorcery that says exile all creatures. That means our creatures too. And for each card exiled this way, you may play that card for as long as it remains exiled, and mana of any type can be spent to cast that spell. Then we exile Heartless Conscription, which does not mean we can cast it the same way. So this is saying, we're not going to take the stuff off the top of your library or out of your graveyard or out of your hand. We're going to take every creature in play, and now it's sitting in exile waiting for us to cast it. And we can cast it with our mana perfectly fixed. So what we'll do is we cast our creatures first, or creatures in whatever order we want, but we cast Nita first again. We put her in exile this way. We don't put her back in the command zone, so we can just recast her for the 3 mana that she costs. And then we start playing out the very best creatures that our opponents have, because every time we do that, we're going to get a trigger for Nita's first ability, and we're going to get counters on all of our creatures, starting with Nita. Just an expensive but very cool board wipe. And it's got Gonti on it. We all love Gonti. So that covers our theft section. We got another section that I consider part of the game plan as a big part. This is our fodder section. These are all cards that are or make creatures that we can use as sacrifice fodder for our commander or for any of our other sacrifice effects. So we're going to start with Dreadhorde Evasion. For 1 and a black, we get an enchantment that says at the beginning of our upkeep, we lose a life and we amass zombies 1. Amass zombies 1 means if we don't have any army creatures, we make a 0/0 black zombie army creature token. And then we put a 1/1 counter, because it's 1, on an army we control, and it's also a zombie. So the first time we do this, we basically get a 0/0 token with a 1/1 counter on it. The next time we do it, if we still have that token, we just put another counter on that token. And if we lost that token, because we sacrificed it to Nita, for example, we make a new token. Either way, we're losing a life and getting a 1 power and toughness on our zombie army each turn. It also says whenever a zombie token we control with power 6 or greater attacks, it gains lifelink until end of turn. So if we don't sacrifice these things, eventually it will get to the point where it is a 6/6. Then we can attack with it, this will trigger, and it will have lifelink until end of turn. We don't have to only get 1/1 counters from Dreadhorde Evasion if we're sacrificing other things to Nita, or rather if we're casting spells that we don't own. Nita's triggering, and we're putting 1/1 counters on all of our creatures, including this zombie army token, so we can get there a little faster. It's also the case that even if our zombie army token is not power 6 or greater, we have other ways of making zombie tokens in this deck, just a few of them, but they can certainly get big enough that when a zombie token we control with power 6 or greater enters, it gains lifelink, and it may not be the zombie army, it may be something else, or maybe several other things. Yeah, not a bad way to spend our life in order to have some fodder. Next, from the Warhammer decks, we have Inquisitorial Rosette. For 2 generic mana, we get an equipment that equips for 3, and has an ability called Inquisition Agents. Whenever the equipped creature attacks, we make a 2/2 white Astartes Warrior creature token with Vigilance that's attacking. Doesn't say tapped and attacking because it has Vigilance, you see. And then attacking creatures gain Menace until end of turn. That's all attacking creatures. The Astartes Warrior, the equipped creature, all of our other creatures. This is a nice form of across-the-board evasion for us that forces our opponents to make some hard choices when they block. It also gives us that warrior token, which has Vigilance, whether or not we, like if it survives this combat, we're going to keep it and it's going to have Vigilance the whole time, or we can sacrifice it to our sacrifice outlets like Nita. Nice. Jadar, Ghoul Caller of Nephalia is next. This is 2 and a black for a 1/1 legendary human wizard that says at the beginning of your end step, if you control no creatures with Decayed, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token with Decayed. Decayed means it is unable to block, and if it attacks, at the end of combat we sacrifice it. So this is essentially, you get a 2/2 every turn that isn't able to block, and if you attack with it, you're going to lose it. But if you lose it, no big deal, because at the beginning of your end step, Jadar will just make another one. So Jadar is really nice for us, giving us a creature we can sacrifice every turn, and it can't block anyway. Or we can just leave it there. We won't get a second one because that first one will still have Decayed, and we can just let it build up until it's big enough that we want to attack with it. These zombie tokens that are decayed probably are not ones that are a great candidate for us to put a bunch of counters on and thereby get lifelink with Dreadhorde Invasion, but you never know, we might. Why not? Next up is March of the Canonized. This is X and double white for an enchantment that when it enters makes a number of 1/1 white vampire creature tokens with lifelink equal to the X. So we might be able to use this to make just 2 tokens or a whole lot more, you never know. Or we could just pay double white, X equals 0, it makes no vampires, and we just use it for its other ability, which is, at the beginning of our upkeep, if our devotion to white and black is 7 or greater, we make a 4/3 white and black vampire demon creature token with flying. Devotion means you count up the colored pips in the casting costs of all the permanents you have in play. So for example, if we had these 4 cards in play, we would have a devotion of white, 2. We would have a devotion of black, also 2, because 1 for each of these cards. And the rosette has no pips of a color in its casting cost, so no contribution there. So this is a devotion to white and black, so our devotion to white and black with these top 4 cards is just 4. 2 from white, 2 from black. But if we were to add these other 4 cards to it, we would get an additional white for 3 white, and an additional 4 black from these cards, giving us more than enough. Yeah, giving us, what is that, 9? Yeah. So at that point, every upkeep, we get a 4/3 vampire. That seems pretty good. Yeah, and that's a 4/3 flyer, which can help us get in for things. It can help us block. Of course, it can be sacrificed. Yeah, solid. March of the Canonized makes us little fodder and then big fodder later on. Next, we have Reassembling Skeleton, a classic that I love that they reprinted in Foundations. This is 1 and a black for a 1/1 skeleton warrior with pay 1 and a black, return it from the graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So we sacrifice this, we pay 2 more, it comes back whenever we need it to. It'll be tapped, but we'll untap with it, during our next turn. So hopefully the idea is we activate this during the end step of our opponent to the right, then it comes back to play, we untap with it, we're good. Nice. Skrelv's Hive is next. Skrelv's Hive is very similar to Dreadhorde Invasion. It's 1 and a white for an enchantment that says at the beginning of your upkeep, you lose a life and make a 1/1 colorless Phyrexian Might artifact creature token with Toxic 1, and this token can't block. So every turn, we're getting a 1/1 that can't block, as opposed to getting a creature that gets +1/+1 that is able to block. However, it's multiple creatures, as opposed to the Dreadhorde Invasion's just army that gets bigger and bigger, so we can use them in multiple different ways. Also, Toxic 1 means when this creature deals combat damage to an opponent, that opponent also gains a number of poison counters equal to its toxic value. So if we attack with 3 of these mites and they all hit, that opponent's going to take 3 damage since they are power 1 and gain 3 poison. If those mites have gotten counters on them, so they're now 4/4s, that opponent will take 12 damage, 3/4 sitting it, and 3 poison, or because the toxic value is still just 1 each. Which is good, because they can't block anyway. Might as well attack with them if we're not going to sacrifice them. It also says Corrupted. As long as an opponent has 3 or more poison counters, creatures we control with Toxic have lifelink. So there is a way to make these mites lifelinkers. They are the only toxic creatures in our deck, I believe. So if we're not attacking with them, an opponent's not going to get corrupted. However, it does not require that the opponent we're attacking be corrupted. As long as any opponent has 3 or more poison counters, any opponent we attack, including a different opponent, when we attack with those mites will still have lifelink. So yeah, there you go. Good little way to sacrifice artifacts, because they are artifact creatures, but also just sacrifice to Nita, that's fine too. Next we have Timeline Color. This is double black for a 2/2 Drix Warlock from Edge of Eternities. It has haste, and it says we can cast it from our graveyard using its Warp ability. Its Warp ability is, for the cost of a black and pay 2 life, we can warp it in, which is neat. Warp is an alternate casting cost, so rather than paying double black and getting a 2/2 with haste, we would pay a single black and 2 life, and we would get this 2/2 with haste that at the end step we have to exile. And when we exile it, we have permission to cast it for its normal casting cost on a later turn at normal timing speed. So let's say we cast the color for 2, we attack with it, Then post-combat, if it survived, we sacrifice it to Nita. We can then warp it in that same turn and sacrifice it again if we want to. And warp it in that same turn and sacrifice it again. Just keep paying a black and 2 life to keep bringing it back that same turn. And if it survives that turn, after we've warped it in, it will go to exile, and then on a later turn, we can cast it from exile for double black, and it will come back in its normal version. So this is a great, similar to our reassembling skeleton, way to repeatedly have a little bit of sacrifice fodder that can also attack with haste. Pretty nice. Next up is Feign the Broker, also from the original Strixhaven deck from Commander 21. This is 2 and a black for a 3/3 legendary human warlock that has 4 cool abilities. If we tap Feign and sack a creature, we can put 2 1/1 counters on a creature. If we tap Feign and remove a counter from a creature, we can make a treasure. If we tap Feign and sack an artifact, we can make a 2/1 white and black Inkling creature token with flying. And we can pay 3 and a black and untap Feign. So Feign, every turn, is going to let us turn one of our resources into a different, more useful resource. Like if we have a creature that's sacrifice fodder, we can put a couple of counters on something. This is at instant speed. This could be just an onboard like combat trick if we needed it to be. Pretty good. If we have counters on our creatures, which we will thanks to Feign, but definitely we will thanks to Nita, we can turn those counters into treasure tokens, which we can use as a ramp effect. We can use that as an artifact that we might sacrifice to Fein's last ability, whatever we need. But usually it's going to be as a ramp, as a way to turn counters into mana. But if we need to, we can sacrifice those treasures or any other artifact, including these little mites from Skrelv's Hive, and turn that artifact into a 2/1 flyer. That seems pretty good, and that is sacrifice fodder 2. And if we've got extra mana lying around, we can untap Feign and do it all over again. Neat. Next up, I've got this search down here. That's unfortunate. We've got Comball, Profiteering Mare. This is 1, a black and a white for a 2/4 legendary human advisor that says, whenever 1 or more tokens your opponents control enter, for each of them, create a tapped token that's a copy of it. This ability triggers only once each turn. So this is on theme for our theft, even though we're not actually stealing something, we're just copying it. So the first time an opponent makes a treasure, or makes a clue, or makes a 1/1 soldier, or any other token they might make, a token copy of something. They cast Irenicus's Vile Duplication on their Ghalta and make a 12/12 flying Ghalta. We make a tapped token that's a copy of it. Only once each turn, but for each opponent. And if an opponent makes tokens on one of our turns, it counts as well. It doesn't matter who's making the tokens, it's just this only triggers once each turn. And it's any opponent on those turns. So it's not like we could do on opponent A's turn, if they make tokens and opponent B makes tokens on opponent A's turn, we get a token for each. It's not the case. It's going to be the first time anyone who isn't us makes a token on each turn. Yeah. However, whenever 1 or more tokens we control enter, whether it's from Comball's first ability or any other token generator, each opponent loses a life and we gain a life. So a little bit of drain for us, and we get to just sort of not steal, but pirate, borrow, copy, whatever you want to think of it as, every token being made by anyone other than us. At least the first one each turn. Neat. Lingering Souls is next. Love Lingering Souls. 2 and a white for a sorcery. Make 2 1/1 spirit creature tokens with flying. Great. Flash it back for 1 and a black. Solid. So for 5 mana, we're making 4 1/1 flyers. Awesome. Nothing needs to be said about this. Just we can use it to sacrifice to our commander. We can use it to block. We can put counters on it and make big flyers. Yeah, love Lingering Souls. Ophiomancer is next with the new Strixhaven Commander art. This is 2 and a black for a 2/2 human shaman that says at the beginning of each upkeep, if you control no snakes, make a 1/1 black snake creature token with Death Touch. Now I know you're thinking, don't we have that giant ape snake? Yes, we do. So that would mean the Ophiomancer is not making a snake each turn. However, without that ape snake, we've got a free snake each turn until we sacrifice it or use it to block, since it has Death Touch or anything else. And then we wait till our next upkeep and we make another one. Might as well. Suki, Courageous Rescuer from Avatar: The Last Airbender is next. This is 1 and double white for a 2/4 legendary human warrior ally that gives all of our other creatures +1/+0. We don't have a lot of pump effects in this deck because we have so many counter effects. But Suki's one of our pumps, and we do have several more in the considering section if you want to take a look for those. Suki also says whenever another permanent we control leaves the battlefield during our turn, for example, if we sacrifice it to our commander who can only do so at sorcery speed, we make a 1/1 white ally creature token, but only once each turn. So we get to replace our sacrifice fodder with more sacrifice fodder. Sweet. Next up, we are looking at Will of the Mardu. This is 2 and a white for an instant that says, choose one. If you control a commander as you cast a spell, you may choose both instead, and we will want to. It says, create a number of 1/1 red warrior creature tokens equal to the number of creatures target player controls. So we just target the player with the most creatures and we make that many 1/1s, and that's pretty good. Or Will of the Mardu deals damage to target creature equal to the number of creatures we control. If we choose both of these, we will make these warriors before we calculate the damage for the second half, so we're going to probably be doing enough damage to kill most anything, assuming we're not casting this when, there's like one creature we want to kill and there's no other creatures in play. Yeah. But we can target ourselves with this first one, so if we're the one with the most creatures, we can just double the number of creatures we have, and then do that damage, hopefully, to a creature we don't control. Nice. Next up is Court of Grace. This is another court enchantment. It's 2 and double white for an enchantment that says when it enters, we become the monarch. Same thing as Court of Lochthwain does. And at the beginning of our upkeep, we make a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying. Same thing we could make with Lingering Souls. But if we're the monarch, instead we make a 4/4 white angel creature token with flying, and that's sweet. So keeping the monarchy really helps us because we get huge flyers. Even if not though, this is a card that comes in, introduces the monarchy, thereby drawing us a card at our end step, and gives us a free piece of sacrifice fodder that flies every turn. Nice. Next is Elegy Acolyte, one of my favorite cards from Edge of Eternities. This is 2 and double black for a 4/4 human cleric with lifelink that says whenever one or more creatures we control deal combat damage to a player, we draw a card and lose a life. So other than this lose a life, this is just curiosity, but not really, it's one or more. So we're only going to draw one card and lose one life if we have 15 creatures do damage to an opponent, but if we split our creatures up, it does say a player. So if we do damage, combat damage with our creatures to all 3 of our opponents, we'll get 3 triggers here. We'll draw 3 cards and we'll lose 3 life. All right. It also says it has a void ability. At the beginning of our end step, if a non-land permanent left the battlefield this turn, or a spell was warped this turn, remember, we have our timeline color, and it can warp, we make a 2/2 colorless robot artifact creature token. So a free piece of fodder as long as something left the battlefield this turn and was not a land. It doesn't say under our control. So if an opponent lost a creature this turn, then that counts and we get a robot. Nice. Next is Felidar Retreat, a classic they reprinted in Foundations. Love it. It's 3 and a white for an enchantment with landfall. Landfall is either make a 2/2 white cat beast creature token, so that's our fodder effect, or put a 1/1 counter on each creature we control and they get vigilance until the end of turn. That's nice too. Having a second source of putting a counter on all of our creatures beyond just our commander is terrific. So yeah, we want to make these cats so we have, more creatures in play that we could put counters on, but also that we can sacrifice to our commander to flashback an instant or sorcery that our opponents control, and when we do that, we put a counter on all of our creatures. But yeah, sometimes we want to go straight to the counter. That's fine too. Solemn Simulacrum is next. This is the sad robot. It's 4 generic mana for a 2/2 artifact creature, Golem, that says when it enters, we may Rampant Growth. We search our library for a basic land, put it on the battlefield tapped, and shuffle. Terrific in a deck that doesn't have any green. Love this friend. It's going to sit around and be a 2/2 that we can attack with, or block with, or put counters on, or just sacrifice to our commander or any of our other outlets, and when it dies, no matter how it did, we draw a card. Or we may draw a card. We're going to. Come on. So yeah, the sad robot is here to help us and is great fodder for us as well. Lolth Spider Queen is next. 3 and double black for a Lolth Planeswalker. There's only one of them because it's from Adventures in the Forgotten Realms. It comes in with 4 loyalty and says whenever a creature we control dies, we put a loyalty counter on Lolth. That's the only way to get loyalty counters on her. Gross. At 0, we draw a card and lose a life. That's okay. At -3, which we can do when she first comes in, we make 2/2/1 black spider creature tokens with menace and reach. These aren't just your regular green spider tokens. They have menace. Neat. And if we get Lolth up to -8, which we can do the same turn she comes down, because we play her, she's at 4 loyalty, we attack or do something else that kills a bunch of creatures, we have at least 4 creatures die, Lolth will get 4 counters put on her, she's at 8, we can -8 her, and we get an emblem that says whenever a creature is dealt combat damage by one or more creatures we control, if that player lost less than 8 life this turn, they lose life equal to the difference. So it makes it so the minimum amount of damage we can do in combat with our creatures is 8, which is, as you know, 20% of the starting life total of a commander player. So yeah, Lolth does a lot for us in this section, of course, because she makes fodder, but she can draw us cards and maybe do a lot more damage to our opponents, and rewards us for having our creatures die, which we're going to have happen plenty. Next up, we've seen the Puppeteer click. It is in the section for the reasons I described before, because we can sacrifice the creature that we steal, of course, and we can also sacrifice the click and have it persist again. It's fodder, and it gets us creatures that can act as fodder. Next, we have Shadrix Silverquill himself, or herself. I can't remember Shadrix's pronouns. I think Shadrix is male, not sure though. In any case, this is 3, a white, and a black for a 2/5 legendary Elder Dragon with flying and double strike. Love to see that. And at the beginning of combat on our turn, we may choose 2 of these, and each mode must target a different player. We can only choose 2, we can't choose all 3, but we don't have to choose any. We can choose 0 or 2. Those are the ways it works. The modes are, a player makes an Inkling, a 2/1 flyer that's white and black. A player draws a card and loses a life, or a player puts a 1/1 counter on each creature they control. So we've got another source of this if we need it. Giving good stuff to our opponents is something we can use politically, of course, because we are a negotiator. So we say to someone, hey, are we friends? I'm happy to leave you alone if you leave me alone for a turn cycle. And you know what? I will give you a creature. I'll give you a flyer to sweeten the deal. And they'll say, I don't really need a flyer. What I really need is card draw. And we say, okay, if you're willing to lose a life in the process, I can give you a card. Do we have a deal? And they might say, oh, sure. Or we say, hey, look, you have got a very dominant board presence. I'm a little scared of you. I would like you not to attack me this turn. And if you don't, I will help you out if you're going to attack everyone else. I'll make all your creatures bigger. And maybe we draw a card in the process. Someone's going to make that deal for sure. So yeah, Shadrix Silverquill can be pretty sweet. Because remember, if we choose to put a counter on each creature we control, Shadrix is one of those as well, which will make them into a 3/6 flying double strike. Pretty good. Next up is Liliana Dreadhorde General, another Planeswalker. 4 and double black for a 6 loyalty Liliana Planeswalker with a static ability. When a creature we control dies, we draw a card. So much card draw comes from Liliana Dreadhorde General. We're going to have a lot of it in this deck. She makes fodder too that can just be sacrificed and die for us, because with +1, we make a 2/2 black zombie creature token. This is another zombie we can make into ultimately big enough that Dreadhorde Evasion allows it to have lifelink when it attacks. You never know, might happen. We can also, and when she comes in even, -4 Liliana to make each player sacrifice 2 creatures of their choice. That includes us, so this is kind of a sacrifice outlet for our many tokens, in addition to a removal effect for our opponent's creatures. Now they get to choose which creatures they're sacrificing, but it's still 2 of them. And when we sacrifice 2 of them, that means we have 2 creatures that died, which means we're going to draw a card for each one that did. Pretty good. And if our opponents are, I guess, inattentive enough to let Liliana Dreadhorde General get up to -9, we can -9 her, and each opponent chooses a permanent they control of each permanent type and sacrifices the rest. Meaning, each opponent gets to keep 1 creature, 1 artifact, 1 enchantment, 1 land, 1 battle, 1 planeswalker. You know, like, it's a crazy board wipe. It's not going to happen with Liliana, and if it does, it basically means we win the game. So, pretty nice. Next up is Sanctuary Warden. This is from Streets of New Capenna, one of my favorite sets. 4 and double white for a 5/5 Angel Soldier with flying that enters with 2 shield counters on it. Shield counters do have an inherent mechanical meaning. The way they work is when a creature with a shield, when a permanent, we'll talk about a creature. When a creature with a shield counter on it would be destroyed or would be dealt damage. That event is replaced by us losing the shield counter. So sort of like how a stun counter is removed from a permanent when that permanent would untap. Instead, that untap event is replaced by removing the stun counter. If you do damage to a Sanctuary Warden, doesn't matter how much it is, it doesn't take that damage, it just loses the shield counter. If you would destroy the Sanctuary Warden, whether with an amount of damage, it's not really that same way, but like if you choose to murder it or something, it doesn't get destroyed. Instead, the shield counter pops off. It's like a bubble that's popping. So yeah, it's very powerful protection on this angel. But we might throw it away, because whenever this creature enters or attacks, it's got a Titan trigger. We may remove a counter from a creature or planeswalker we control. It doesn't have to be one of these shield counters, but it can be. Usually, though, we want to get rid of one of the +1/+1 counters that's sitting on one of our creatures that we don't need as much as what we hope to get out of it. Because if we do that, we draw a card, and we get a 1/1 green and white citizen creature token. So we make fodder in exchange for a counter, hopefully a 1/1 counter that we've put on one of our creatures with Nita, and we turn that counter into card draw, a card and a creature that we can sacrifice later. This is great. So we want to keep these shield counters on it to protect it. But if we really need to, we can eat the shield counters when it enters or attacks to draw cards and make citizens. Nice. And finally, we've got our Thieving Amalgam, which, of course, manifests cards off of our opponent's libraries. So that makes fodder for us to sacrifice as well. And that covers the end of our fodder section. And, oh, hey, did you just like the video? Nice. Thanks so much. I'm just kidding. You don't have to like the video if you don't actually like it. I appreciate it, but, you like it if you want to. I am grateful for you being here no matter what. Thanks for watching. So we've covered a lot of the cards in our game plan. I want to go to our support sections of our deck now, starting with our card advantage section. This is a set of cards that I have tagged as draw. It doesn't mean they all draw cards. I just use this as a shorthand for card advantage. So Gix, when creatures do combat damage to one of our opponents, we can pay life to draw cards, or the controller of those creatures can do so, which includes us. That's sweet. A nice way for us to actually draw cards. Morbid Opportunist is 2 and a black for a 1/3 human rogue that says whenever one or more other creatures die, we draw a card, but only once each turn. It does not say other creatures you control. So this works when we kill someone else's creatures, when opponent A kills opponent B's creatures. As long as this hasn't triggered already that turn, every time some creature dies, other than the Opportunist itself, we get to have a card. Nice. Court of Grace and Court of Lochthwain are both here. They both make us the Monarch, so at least that turn, we're going to draw a card in our end step. Elegy Acolyte gives us the ability to draw a card whenever one or more of our creatures do combat damage to a player, and we lose life in the process. Solemn Simulacrum, when it dies, we can draw a card. We can we can zero Lolth to, I want to say +0, because zeroing her makes it sound like she's lost all of her loyalty. We can activate the 0-cost loyalty ability to draw a card and lose a life. Shadrick Silverquill lets us choose to target ourselves and draw a card and lose a life. Liliana lets us draw a card every time any of our creatures die. Sanctuary Warden draws us a card whenever it enters or attacks, and we choose to remove a counter from a creature or planeswalker we control. Staff of Eden, if we tap it, we can draw a card for each permanent we control but don't own. And finally, Hoarding Broodlord is 5 and triple black for a 7/6 flying dragon with Convoke. Convoke meaning we can tap creatures to help pay for this, and each creature that we tap pays for either a generic mana, or if that creature is black, can pay for one of our black pips. Because Convoking a spell lets us tap creatures and they provide either a generic mana or a mana of a color that that creature is. So we could, if we have enough tokens in play, tap 8 creatures and play the Broodlord without paying any mana at all. Sweet. It says when it enters, we search our library for a card and exile it face down and shuffle. And for as long as that card remains exiled, we may play it. This is a taste of our own medicine. We can exile one of our own cards face down, and it stays in exile, for the rest of the game until we play it. Neat. It's play, so it can be a land if we need it to be. This does not fix our mana at all, but it's in our library, so we're probably going to be able to cast it no matter what. Nice. But we don't really have to worry about its mana that as much as we normally would because the Broodlord says spells we cast from exile have Convoke, meaning every one of the spells that we're trying to cast from exile that we've exiled from our opponent's libraries or hands or graveyards, all of that stuff, if we're able to cast it in a way that would be, that comes from our theft effects, we can cast it with Convoke. We can also, if you'll note, Nita's ability, her second ability, if we pay 2 and sack a creature, we exile an instant or sorcery from an opponent's graveyard, and we can cast it, which means we're casting it from exile. So we can convoke her ability, the cards that we exile with her ability as well. So Hoarding Broodlord does an awful lot for us. It is expensive, but it's less expensive than it seems because it has Convoke. So yeah, and it's in this section because it finds us a card, puts it in exile, gives us the potential to cast it, so it's like that it draws us a card. This is a free Demonic Tutor, I guess free on top of our 8 mana dragon. So yeah, pretty good. That is our card advantage section. Let's go now to acceleration, which again I just tag as ramp. This is the Soul Ring. Of course, you've seen Soul Ring. This is a single generic mana for an artifact that taps for 2 colorless. Great, that's what we want. Yeah, if we need to cast spells using colorless mana, Soul Ring is here to help us with it. Great. Or any generic mana costs, of course. Wayfarer's Bauble is next. This is a single generic mana for an artifact that if we pay 2, tap, and sack it, we Rampant Growth. So this is a free Rampant Growth, or this is a Rampant Growth, I should say, that comes with an additional cost that we could pay on a separate turn, so it's almost as good as Rampant Growth in some ways, and terrific for our deck. We want to be able to get a little bit more land into play with this little artifact. It lets us do so. Arcane Signet is next. This is a 2 mana untapped artifact that taps for 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity. So in this deck, white or black. Sure, seems great. A 2 mana untapped mana rock. That's exactly what we want. I hope we have at least 2 more in this deck. Oh look, we do. Orzhov's Signet is 2 generic mana for an artifact that comes in untapped, and it makes a white and a black, but we have to pay a mana into it to tap it. So we're tapping 2 mana sources, whatever we're paying this cost with, and the Signet to get 2 mana, so it's filtering our mana into our 2 colors. That seems pretty good. We just have to keep in mind that we cannot use it unless we have a mana to put into it in order to activate it. Not so for Talisman of Hierarchy. This is a 2 mana untapped rock that taps for colorless, or taps for white or black if we're willing to let it do a damage to us. And we always will be. Because the way I like to describe this is, if you need colored mana out of this, then the definition of needing it is, it's the difference between you being able to cast a spell or not. Which is sort of like saying, would you pay a mana, or would you pay a life in order to cast cast an extra spell on your turn? I would do that every turn. If every turn I had to spend 1 life to get an extra spell out, of course I would do that. So if you're spending 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 life over the course of the game in order to fix your mana and cast 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 more spells than you otherwise would have, Talisman of Hierarchy is amazing. And every time you don't need colored mana, you just need some mana, you just tap it for colorless. Problem solved. Love this card. We've seen Feign. Feign can let us tap and remove a counter from a creature we control to make a treasure token. That's acceleration, especially with all of the tokens that we have floating around in this deck. Realmbreaker lets us essentially Rampant Growth every turn, because once it's in play, if we pay 2 and tap it, we get to have an opponent mill 3 and we get to steal one of their lands into play tapped for us. It's true that if it leaves the battlefield, it'll go to exile instead of somewhere else, but we don't really care about that. If it leaves control of ours, one of our opponents is trying to kill our lands. That's not very nice. But otherwise, we're kind of Rampant Growthing every turn with Realmbreaker. It's very cool. Gaunty lets us make a treasure every time we cast a spell that we don't own. Same is true for every player. We're going to be doing that probably a lot more than the other players, so yeah, a little bit of treasure every turn we get a chance to. Maybe sometimes more than once a turn. Petty Larceny, it lets us look at the top 2 exile of an opponent's library, exile them face down, we can cast them, etc., but it makes a treasure token, so it's acceleration. Solemn Simulacrum enters and Rampant Growths us, that's acceleration. And of course, Hoarding Broodlord only does this for all of the spells we're casting from exile, but for itself and those spells, they all have Convoke, and that seems pretty good. That is our acceleration section. Next comes our interaction, which is tagged as removal. Hopeful Initiate is our first card. This is a single white for a 1/2 human warlock with training. Training means whenever this creature attacks with another creature that has greater power than this creature gets a counter. Neat. So the Hopeful Initiate, it's possible if we're attacking and our opponent doesn't have something that can stop a 1/2, or we're attacking with something bigger and our opponent doesn't have something that can stop that bigger thing and a 2/3, then yes, it's possible for the Initiate to get bigger over the course of the game, especially if we get it out on turn 1. That seems nice too. However, most of the time in this deck, the source of counters we're putting on the Initiate is our commander. So every time we cast something that a spell we don't own, then we're going to get a 1/1 counter on all of our creatures, and the Initiate is one of those. Sounds good. Once it's got some counters, we can pay 2 and a white and remove 2 1/1 counters from among creatures we control. It doesn't just have to be on the Initiate itself. Among creatures we control. We can do that, and we can disenchant something, destroy an artifact or enchantment. So it is 1 more mana, and it requires our counters, but it's repeatable. Pretty nice. Next, we have Path to Exile and Swords to Plowshares. The way I normally introduce these is that these are the same spell with only one difference, but they are both instants, they both cost a single white mana, and they both exile target creature, and they give that creature's controller a little kickback. Swords to Plowshares gives that creature's controller life equal to the creature's power, and Path to Exile lets that creature's controller rampant growth. So both of these are extremely powerful, cheap, instant speed, unconditional creature removal spells. Love it. Yeah, run them both. Fracture is next. It has new Secrets of Strixhaven Mystical Archive art. Incredible. The original Fracture was from Strixhaven as well, the first Strixhaven. But yeah, this is unbelievable art. It's just wonderful. And it's a white and a black for an instant that destroys an artifact, enchantment, or planeswalker. So this is just disenchant, but rather than a white and a colorless, or a white and a generic mana, the generic is black so that it can kill planeswalkers as well. Very flexible 2 mana removal spell. Anguished Unmaking, even more flexible, but 3 mana. 1 a white and a black for an instant that exiles an on-land permanent, and we gain 3 life. We lose 3 life. So I don't typically put Anguished Unmaking in my decks. I think it's a little bit on the, I don't know, seems funny to say Anguished Unmaking is too strong, but generally, I want to have my 3 mana spells that deal with non-land permanents not be quite as powerful as this, or at least quite as expensive as this, but it's not expensive this time, thanks to Secrets of Strixhaven Commander. So yeah, we went ahead with it. What I normally do for 3 mana deal with a non-land permanent is Emergency Eject, at least in white decks. This is my answer to Generous Gift. A lot of people like to run Generous Gift, which is 2 and a white, destroy a permanent, its controller gets a 3/3 green elephant. Most of the decks that I build are, the power level is titrated for pods that are not looking to have any kind of land denial at all, which means you shouldn't run something that gives your opponent a 3/3 just because it can also hit lands, when you could run Stroke of Midnight, which is the same cost, can't hit lands, and gives them a 1/1 instead. But if you're going to do that, you should run Emergency Eject, which I'm just saying I think is slept on in Commander. This is 2 and a white, and it destroys a non-land permanent. It's the thing we want to do anyway, at instant speed, and its controller creates a lander token. Instead of a creature token, they get an artifact that is just a Wayfarer's Bauble. Pay 2, tap, sack, and rampant growth. So this is 2 more mana to hit any non-land permanent and destroy it rather than exile it, versus Path to Exile, which only hits creatures. However, Path to Exile just gives them the land. Emergency Eject gives them a lander that they have to pay for and activate themselves. So obviously Path to Exile is better for creatures. Emergency Eject, very good for the 3 mana white removal spell that people are looking for in their decks. If you don't want to run Generous Gift, why run anything that gives someone a creature? Give them a lander, make them pay for it. Sounds good. We've seen Will of the Mardu, its second mode, deals damage to target creature equal to the number of creatures we control. Abstruse Appropriation, exiles a non-land permanent. That seems good. That's Anguished Unmaking. Again. We've seen Liliana, her second loyalty ability has each player sack 2 creatures, which is not removal we can control, but it is 2 creatures. That's pretty good. But we also have Dimension X Pizzasaur. This is from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Eternal product, I guess. I don't know if it's in the Commander deck or in the Turtle Fight Night. I don't know what that product is called. Something. Anyway, this is 3 and a black for a 2/1 artifact creature, food alien mutant. It's an alien mutant because it's a creature. It's a food because it's an alien, or an artifact. You get it. It says when it enters, we put 2/1/1 counters on target creature. Doesn't have to be the Pizzasaur itself. And then, when we do, we destroy up to 1 target creature with mana value less than or equal to the number of counters among permanents we control. It doesn't even say +1/+1 counters, just any number of counters. So even if we don't have any counters at all, we're putting 2 counters on something so we can destroy something mana value 2 or less. A creature, that is. So the Pizzasaur can be very powerful removal, and we can put those counters on it, and it's a 4/3 for 4, which is fine. We can also pay 2, tap, and sack the Pizzasaur, and we gain 3 life, and each opponent loses 3. So it's even better than normal food. I guess it gives our opponents indigestion, or maybe this is just like 3 loss of life because they're jealous of our delicious pizza? I don't know. This doesn't seem that appetizing. That is our interaction section. We have 2 Wraths, which we've already seen in this deck. Heartless Conscription is our real Wrath. It exiles every creature, and then we get to cast them. Helps our commander, which hopefully we've exiled as well and we can recast. And again, Liliana possibly is a Wrath if we get up to -9 with her. And if we do, that's a Wrath that probably ends the game. So pretty good. And those are our Wraths, and that covers our support section. We have a bunch of sections to supplement our game plan as well, starting with our synergy section. These are cards that care about the number of things and the kind of things that we're doing in this deck with our commander. So we've already seen Hopeful Initiate. It cares about the number of counters among creatures we control, because it uses them to disenchant something. Feign cares about a number of the things we're doing, especially the counters we have, but also our token creatures and makes creatures, etc. Dimension X Pizzasaur cares about the number of creatures we have. Don't worry, I'll get to Hearthstone in a moment. Puppeteer Click. It synergizes because it has persist. So once it has persisted, when we put counters on our creatures, which we often are doing, we're going to be able to remove that -1/-1 counter so it can persist again. That's good, good synergy. Sanctuary Warden cares about us having counters as well, because we can remove them in order to draw a card and make a citizen whenever it attacks or enters. Staff of Eden cares about the number of permanents we control but don't own. So does Arvanox. And Hoarding Broodlord lets us cast our spells from exile with Convoke, because we've got a lot of spells we're casting from exile. The one card we haven't seen in this section is Hearthstone, an old classic. This is 3 generic mana for an artifact that says activated abilities of creatures cost 1 generic less to activate, but it can't reduce the mana cost to less than 1 mana. Even if this did nothing other than help our commander, it helps our commander, because Nita requires us to spend 2 mana and sack a creature in order to exile a instant or sorcery from our opponent's graveyards and sort of flash it back. Doing that at 1 mana cost is so powerful. Just being able to do that, because Nita doesn't require us to tap her in order to make that happen. So being able to do it for half the mana, since 2 - 1 is 1, we can do that multiple times in the same turn. We can get even more value out of her first ability, because every time we activate her second ability, we're casting a spell that we don't own. So we're getting to put counters on all of our creatures. But that's not the only thing that the Hearthstone applies to. Hopeful Initiate becomes pay 1 and a white and remove 2 counters to disenchant something. Dimension X Pizzasaur becomes pay a single mana and tap and sack to drain your opponents and gain 3 life. Feign can be untapped for 2 and a black. That's still very powerful. This can get really strong in our deck. It's not to be underestimated for how good it is, especially if it's just with our commander. So that is our synergy section. We're going to talk now about our recursion. We've got a couple of cards in here, 4 cards, that can come back and bring other things back. So specifically, Reassembling Skeleton and Timeline Color can reanimate themselves. Reassembling Skeleton can come back tapped to the battlefield for the same cost as its casting cost. Timeline Color can't really reanimate itself, but we can recast it with its warp ability from the graveyard. Sweet. Lingering Souls has flashback itself. Very good. And Puppeteer Click can let us reanimate any of our creatures, any of our opponent's creatures, as well as it comes back itself because it persists. And we can, of course, cheat with that by annihilating the -1/-1 counter by putting any +1/+1 counters on it so we can keep repeating the process. Those are our recursion cards. Next, we have a section that calls out our death triggers. These are cards that care about creatures dying. Morbid Opportunist, when any creature dies, only once each turn, but still any creature, we draw a card. Suki, when one of our permanents leaves the battlefield during our turn, we get an ally, only once each turn. Elegy Acolyte cares about at our end step if a non-land permanent left the battlefield. So it's not exactly a death trigger, but it's similar enough. Or if a spell was warped, then we get a 2/2 robot. Lolth gets loyalty counters every time one of our creatures dies. Liliana draws us cards for each of our creatures that dies. And Thieving Amalgam, whenever we have a creature that we control but don't own die, its owner loses 2 and we gain 2. So pretty nice. It's funny to see how many different ways that we have in this deck to lose life, but also a surprising number of ways to gain it. Anyway, that is our death triggers section. We have a drain section as well. There's a lot more of this in the considering section. I just wanted to call these ones out. Combal drains our opponents for 1 and we gain 1 whenever we have 1 or more tokens enter. It's going to happen a lot. Dimension X Pizzasaur, we can sacrifice to gain 3 and each opponent loses 3. Lolth, it's not really drain, but it creates a minimum amount of combat damage that is 8, which is sort of like drain. And then of course Thieving Amalgam drains each opponent for 2 and we gain 2 whenever one of our creatures that we control but don't own dies. So that is our drain section. Next we have a section for counters. These are cards that put counters on our creatures that aren't our commander. Or that our commander puts counters on creatures. These cards also put counters on creatures. There we go. Training can put counters on itself. Which we can use. That's fine. Feign the Broker can put 2/1/1 counters on a creature if we sack a creature in the process. Felidar Retreat can put a counter on each of our creatures when we have landfall. And Shadrix can put a 1/1 counter on each of our creatures if we decide to have that happen at the start of combat. There we go. That's our counter section. Next, we've got Evasion. These are cards that give our other creatures evasion. Inquisitorial Rosette, when the equipped creature attacks, we don't just make a 2/2 vigilant creature that's attacking. All of our creatures, including the equipped one, the token, and any other creature, gain menace. Predator's Hour, when we cast this, it gives all our creatures menace, and the Dream Thief bandana-esque effect. We haven't seen Abzan Falconer. This is 2 and a white for a 2/3 human soldier with Outlast for a single white, meaning at sorcery speed we can pay a white and tap it to put a 1/1 counter on it. Not very exciting, but it's an okay ability, but we have this because of this ability. Each creature we control with a 1/1 counter on it has flying. So all we need is one activation or one trigger of our commander's triggered ability, and all of our creatures flies. That seems pretty great. That is our evasion section. Next we have protection. These are ways to keep ourselves safe. And it's all 3 of the cards that we've seen already that are sort of soft power safety. We want to dissuade our opponents from attacking us because Cunning Rhetoric will let us exile the top card of their library and give us the ability to cast it. Gix encourages our opponents to attack each other rather than us, because if they attack us, they don't get the opportunity to pay life to draw cards. And Gaunty encourages the same thing, because as long as they're casting spells that they don't own, they make treasure, and the best way to do that is to do combat damage to our opponents, not us. So yeah, soft power protection, that's what we got going on here. We also have this pump section. It's Suki. I mentioned it earlier. She's the only card that I kept in the deck that actually gives a little bit of an anthem effect or any kind of pump that isn't based on counters, but there she is. Next up, we have our outlets section. This is the only 2 cards that are really in this deck as sack outlets other than our commander, but our commander's a pretty great one. However, Feign, being able to put counters on our creatures by sacking a creature, pretty solid. And Xander's Pact lets us casualty a card, casualty a creature away in order to make a copy of it. And I mentioned earlier that Liliana Dreadhorde General is kind of a sacrifice outlet. Not really, we're sort of forced to sacrifice with that -4 ability, but you could think of it a similar way. And last of all, it's Gaunty, Night Minister, as a payoff card. Payoff cards are cards that reward us for what we were going to do anyway. I started with a lot of these, and this is the only one that made the cut. And it's still a solid card because it gives us a treasure every time a player casts a spell they don't own, and we're going to be doing that a lot. And that covers all of the spells in our deck. As usual, we're going to go over our land base now, starting with our basics. We are running 8 plains, 13 swamps, because we're more heavily black. We could go down on our basics our basic planes if we wanted to, but I like to try and keep, for commanders like ours with a low mana value of 3, and for our many cards that are white, which is our minority color, I like to try and fudge it a little bit so that, you know, I make the balance of basics close to what the balance is in our deck, and then I push them toward the middle a little bit so that it doesn't, as long as it doesn't impinge on the amount of black we need to cast our spells, I want to have plenty of white, even if it's too much for the proportion, just so we make sure we always have access to the white mana when we need it. There we go. We are running Umbral Expanse. It's the new bicycle land in white and black from Secrets of Strixhaven Commander. I'm sure we're going to be seeing more reprints of this soon because they finished the bicycle and tangle land cycles. Great. This is a tap land that is also a plains and a swamp. It's got basic types, which means it taps for white or black inherently, and that's great. That's just a sweet, you know, effect. It also has cycling for 2 generic, meaning we can pay 2 and discard it from our hand to draw a card. Something we might do late in the game. If we draw this and we don't need any more land, we just need more cards. Or if it's early in the game or middle of the game and we are just desperate for card draw, even if we need the land, we might be willing to throw this away, and that's okay to do. Good to have some flexibility there and options. If you wanted to upgrade this, I would say Godless Shrine, the shock land, is the best option. Just a lot more expensive for a typed land that might be a tap land. Next, we have Isolated Chapel. This is a check land. It enters tapped unless we control a plains or swamp, and it taps for white or black. Luckily, we have 21 plains and swamps in this deck that are all basic, plus we have a bicycle land and a tango land that also have those basic types. So 23% of our deck is plains and swamps. So Isolated Chapel is very likely to come in untapped as an untapped duel if we don't just like start with it as a tapped duel on turn 1 when we weren't going to cast a spell anyway, probably. So yeah, very likely, as long as you've got 18 to 20 lands of the types you need, I think these check lands are very strong and very inexpensive for what they would be. You could upgrade this, and normally I would say a slow land, but the slow lands have dropped in price, so it's actually in this deck. So yeah, run Isolated Chapel, it's great. Next up, we've got both filter lands in our colors. Desolate Mire is the first one. This is a land with the same text as our Orzhov Signet. Pay 1, tap it, make a white and a black. So it filters everything we said about the Signet is true here too. Great to see in our land base. We also have Fetid Heath. This is a land that comes in untapped and taps for colorless, but if we pay a white or a black into it and tap it, it can make double white, double black, or one of each, which is very good, especially since this can tap for mana without having any mana to pay into it. However, it cannot make colored mana unless we have colored mana to put into it. If we don't have a white or a black, if we've only got like a Soul Ring, then we can't filter into colored mana with this, we can only make colorless mana. As opposed to the Desolate Mire, which only needs, well, it just has a generic mana cost. We can put any kind of mana into this and make colored mana. So both are good in our deck. These are our 5 fixing lands. We're running Command Tower, of course, because it's a untapped duel for us. It comes in untapped, taps for 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity, the same text as Arcane Signet, makes white or black. It's great. Untapped duel, we've got plenty of tapped duels in this deck. We would run those as well, and Path of Ancestry is one of them. This is a land that enters tapped and has the same text as the Command Tower, taps for 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity. However, when we use its mana to cast a creature spell that shares a creature type with our commander, we scry 1. Neat. That means anytime we cast Nita herself, because of course she shares types with herself, then we get a scry. She is a human advisor. We have 11 other humans in this deck, all of whom can get us a scry when we use Path of Ancestry's mana to cast them, and one of those humans is a human advisor. So still just 11 other cards. But that means a total of 12 cards, including our commander, which is like an eighth of the deck. Pretty good. We're running Tainted Field. I don't often run the Tainted lands because they work like this. They come in untapped and tap for colorless, or they can tap for white or black, or this one can, as long as we control a swamp. But in this deck, we've got 15 swamps. We've got 13 basic swamps, a bicycle land, and a tango land. So the likelihood of us running a Tainted land, like I was saying, I don't like to put the Tainted lands in my deck unless my majority color is black, in which case, great, it works. So yeah, this will fix our mana most of the time in our deck. Otherwise, it's just an untapped land that taps for colorless, and that's fine too. Good to have some flexibility with like abstruse appropriation, so that we can cast things, or we can tap things for colorless mana if we need to. We're running Myriad Landscape, also taps for colorless mana, but it is a tap land that lets us, if we pay 2 tap and sack it, search our library for up to 2 basic land cards that share a land type, so either 2 basic plains or 2 basic swamps in this deck, then put them on the battlefield tapped and shuffle. So while this comes in tapped, requires us to pay into it and tap it, and then finds 2 lands that are themselves coming in tapped, it is 1 land drop that turns into 2 lands, so it is, even though it sounds like an oxymoron, this is slow acceleration. It's acceleration in our land base. It just takes a little bit to do, and it's worth doing. You know, sometimes you end up with more white sources than you need and not enough black sources. Myriad Landscape solves that. Works the same way in reverse as well, since we have fewer white sources than black in this deck. So yeah, it is a little annoying to have to sort of take a turn off sometimes in order to activate your Myriad Landscape and then get lands into play that you can't even use that turn, but at least you're able to cast spells on your next turn because you've done that. So yeah, worth doing. Similarly is Temple of the False God. I know not everyone likes this card, but this is an untapped land that taps for 2 colorless mana. That's Soul Ring mana, because this is a soul land. We just can't activate it unless we have at least 4 other lands in play, so that's 5 including itself. So that means this is acceleration that doesn't work early game. It is acceleration because it's a unconditional 2 mana, or I guess not unconditional, but it's a land that makes 2 mana without costing us any other lands or mana sources in play. We just can't put it into play early on and expect it to do anything. So if our opening hand is a basic plains and a Temple of the False God and no other mana sources, we probably want a mulligan. But if this is our 5th land, we're probably jumping from 4 mana to 6, and that's great. Acceleration is best early game. It doesn't mean it's worthless any other time. Temple of the False God is good, especially for the kind of decks that I build. Next up, we've got Caves of Koilos. This is a pain land. This is a land that is exactly the same as our Talisman of Hierarchy, just as a land. Taps for colorless, or white or black if we let it do a damage to us. Sounds great. We love this effect. If you want to upgrade this, you can't. This is a great land. Keep it. Obviously, you can upgrade this to like more powerful lands of different types. I usually say that for the pain lands, you could side grade this to a Bright Climb pathway. Pathways are modal double-faced lands, so it comes in as an untapped white source on the front or black source on the back, and you've got to choose, and you don't get to choose, you don't get to change it later. But I think having an untapped dual land, even if it does damage to you, is just more powerful, and it's a lot cheaper. So yeah. We've got Shine Shadow Snarl as our reveal land. This is a land that taps for white or black, and as it enters, we can reveal a plains or swamp from our hand. If we don't, it comes in tapped, meaning we've got 23 cards in this deck that are plains or swamps, so the likelihood of us playing Shine Shadow Snarl and it not coming in untapped is not high. It's higher than our Isolated Chapel check land, but that's okay. It's okay to have another check style land in our deck, especially for one that is so inexpensive as this. If you were to want to upgrade this, I would say the new Bleach, I guess it's not that much, it's not that new anymore, but Bleachbone Verge. The Verge lands are very strong and are kind of checklandy as well. Yeah, so that's what I would do with that. I mentioned, I guess we could do the Temple of Silence first. Yeah, this is a scry land. It comes in tapped, makes white or black, and scries 1. So guaranteed scry as opposed to sort of the conditional scry of Path of Ancestry. But it's a tap land that makes our colors and gives us a little extra value, sure. If you want to upgrade this to the Surveil Land Shadowy Backstreet, you sure can, but it's a lot more money. And I was saying a moment ago, yeah, Shattered Sanctum is a slow land. This is a land that enters tapped unless we control 2 or more other lands of any type, and then it makes white or black. So this is what I normally would recommend you upgrade your check land to, but because Secrets of Strixhaven is reprinting these slow lands into standard, it's only $1 right now, and I expect this price to go down. So yeah, this is a solid inclusion for our sort of checklandy cycle of the check land, the reveal land, and now the slow land. Yeah, pretty solid for us. Next, we are running Eclipsed Step. This is the new Tango land. It is in this deck because I hate that it's $3. It just came out. I hope this price goes down, and it probably will now that they are able to print this card, since it's brand new, into other Commander products. This is also a dual-typed land. It's called a Tango land because it enters tapped unless you control 2 or more basic lands, meaning it needs 3 to tango. So this is the same text as our slow land, except that it has the word basic in it, so it's less likely to come in untapped, but it might. And in our deck, when we have 21 basic lands, it has a pretty high chance of doing so. So yeah, another sweet dual typed land, I should say, and it could come in. It's not that unlikely to come in as an untapped dual. Pretty solid. Finally, we have these 3 utility lands. Very few utility lands compared to what I normally run. Castle Ardenvale is a land that enters tapped unless we control the plains, and it looks like a cake. Love this card. It taps for white, or if we pay 2 and double white and tap it, we can make a 1/1 white human creature token. Great. We just get a free piece of sacrifice fodder, a nice token that we can do anything we need to with. It's a good mana sink in our land base. So yeah, love Castle Ardenvale. Remember, control the plains, doesn't say basic plains. We've got plenty of those. Demolition Field is next. I mentioned earlier on that the kind of decks I build are intended for pods of a power level that usually has the attitude they don't want their lands messed up. They don't want people denying them mana. But you have to have an answer to a problematic non-basic sometimes. Like the examples I normally give are a Rogue's Passage in someone's Voltron deck. If they've got like a 17/17 commander and they're able to attack unblockably, that's something that's empowering their game plan too much for you to be able to have a good shot at winning. Or if they're running something like a Maze of Ith or a Glacial Chasm and they're preventing you from doing damage to them, then that's them stopping you from executing your own game plan. So dealing with those kinds of things in a way that doesn't deny them mana, that's something that's a fine type of interaction, and I think Demolition Field does that well. This is an untapped land that taps for colorless, or we can pay 2, tap, and sack it to destroy a non-basic land that an opponent controls, and then that opponent gets to search their library for a basic and put it on the battlefield untapped. And so do we. So neither player is down a land. We even have mana right then, assuming, of course, that we both had a basic land left in our library, but we've dealt with the non-basic that was a problem for us and for the table, and no one is missing any mana production. So I think this is pretty agreeable even for tables that just can't handle the idea of land destruction. Finally, we're running Rogue's Passage of our own, because sometimes in a deck that can put a 1/1 counter on every creature we control, we get a creature that's big enough to close things out if it can't be blocked. So this is an untapped land that taps for colorless, or we pay 4 and tap it to make a creature unblockable this turn. A great way for us to close games out. Or to be a little political. If opponent A is like, wow, I really wish I could attack opponent B, but they've got so many blockers, we could say to them, hey, if you leave me alone for a turn cycle or 2, I'll use my Rogue's Passage to make your big creature unblockable, so you can attack opponent B with impunity. And they'll say, that sounds great, go ahead and do it. And we'll say, no. You have to attack first. Because if we had to activate Rogue's Passage before you attack, you could then declare that creature at us, and we couldn't attack it. And they will say, oh, that's fair. And we'll say, well, we're playing a Nita deck. This is all about making fair deals. You attack first, and we'll activate it during your declare attacker step. And they'll say, okay, this is me operating in good faith. I'm going to declare this attack. And because we are a good player and a kind person to our fellow players, we will declare that we're going to activate the Rogue's Passage and help their creature attack. Because when that happens, we have made a deal that probably helps us in the future, but also does damage using a creature that's not ours, so we're not risking anything or committing our resources, other than the Rogue's Passage and 4 mana, to harming one of our opponents, namely opponent B. The fact that they are also our enemy doesn't mean that, the fact that opponent A is technically an enemy of ours doesn't mean that opponent B isn't also an enemy. So, or an opponent, I should say. No one's enemies. We're all here to play as friends. Point being, we're using opponent A's resources and some of ours to do damage to an opponent without risking any of our creatures. It's also the case that we don't have to use this politically, we could just use it strategically by saying, if opponent A is already attacking opponent B, before blockers, we could just make opponent A's creature unblockable. We don't have to make a deal with them. We could just zip in and say, hey, before you block, I'm going to make that creature unblockable with my Rogue's Passage. And they'll say, why are you doing that? And we'll say, because it kills you, and you're my opponent too. And they'll say, oh, I guess that's fair. So it's a moment that doesn't come up at a lot of tables, but making someone else's creature unblockable as a surprise is the same thing as like using a combat trick to make someone else's creature bigger or flying or something along those lines. It's just never expected, and it's always fun. It's always like a moment where the table will remember it, even if it's not that much fun for the person who is negatively affected by it. So yeah, Rogue's Passage, usable in a bunch of ways, and also makes colorless mana good for our abstruse appropriation. And that sums it up. Again, I'm releasing new Secrets of Strixhaven decks every Thursday through the end of June when Marvel Superheroes drops, so let me know in the comments if you'd like to see a specific commander or style of deck. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you want to support what I do on this channel, make sure to like and subscribe. Ring that bell if you want to be notified when my videos go live. Consider becoming a member of the channel if you wish. But most of all, remember that magic is fun. You should play more Magic.